She met him when she was still searching for something steady in a world that often felt like it was crumbling beneath her. He had a calm way about him, a quiet confidence that made her feel safe in ways she hadn't realized she craved. At first, it was in the little things: how he remembered her coffee order, how he held the door without thinking, how he asked about her day and actually listened. She began to picture their life together in the blank spaces of her future. Late at night, when he was already asleep beside her, she'd trace her finger over the bare space on her ring finger and imagine the moment he'd finally place something there. She thought about the kind of vows she'd write, the song they'd dance to, the dress she would wear. She believed in him more than she had ever believed in anyone. When his business hit a rough patch, she worked overtime to help keep them afloat. When his confidence wavered, she was the one whispering belief back into him. She kept every little love note he ever wrote, folded neatly in a box beside her bed. Every detail of their relationship felt like a promise building toward something permanent. She was sure he felt it too. How could he not? He'd once told her she made him believe in soulmates. And so with every shared morning, every quiet night in, and every plan made for someday, she built a future on the foundation of trust and love she thought they had poured together. It happened on what was supposed to be a special night, an evening she had quietly hoped would mark a turning point in their story. She had taken extra time getting ready, choosing the dress he once said made her glow, curling her hair just the way he liked. They were surrounded by friends, laughter, soft music, and the subtle clinking of glasses, the kind of setting where love usually deepens, not dies. She had imagined that maybe, just maybe, he would finally take the next step, that all the years of loyalty, patience, and quiet sacrifice would be seen, honored, and returned. But instead, as the topic of engagements came up around the table, he leaned back in his chair with a smirk and said words that sliced through her like cold metal. In front of everyone, without hesitation, he declared that she didn't deserve a ring. Laughter followed, not from her, but from others who thought he was joking. But he wasn't. She saw it in his eyes, the dismissal, the sharp edge of his indifference, the casual cruelty of someone who no longer cared how deeply his words could wound. Her heart didn't break in a dramatic, cinematic way. It just cracked quietly, like porcelain under pressure, something fine and fragile meeting its limit. She smiled through the sting, through the burn behind her eyes, and said nothing. But inside, something vital shifted. The room carried on around her, oblivious, while she sat there, slowly realizing that the man she had built her dreams around had just made it clear. He never saw her as part of his. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't scream or beg for answers. Instead, she went home in silence, the quiet in her apartment echoing louder than any outburst could. She poured herself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wall for a long time. The pain sat inside her chest like a stone, solid, cold, unmoving. And then, without fully understanding why, she reached for a pen. There was no plan, no dramatic intention behind it. Just a need. Her hands moved slowly at first, trembling, as the words began to pour out onto the paper. She didn't address it to him. She didn't want him to have the power to dismiss her one more time. Instead, she wrote to someone who might still have a heart soft enough to feel what he no longer could, his mother. She didn't dramatize or embellish. She simply told the truth. The story of how she had loved him fully and quietly. The way she had held him up in the dark when no one else knew he was breaking. The things she had given up for his dreams. She wrote about the moment he humiliated her, not to shame him, but so that someone somewhere would understand how deeply she had been dismissed. Her words were not bitter. They were calm, painfully honest, stitched together with grace. When she finished, she folded the letter with care, her movements steady and deliberate. It was not revenge she was after, not really. It was clarity, dignity, a final act of self-respect in a story where she had been silent for far too long. She mailed the letter 2 days later, without ceremony, without expectation. A simple envelope, her name signed at the bottom in steady ink. Then she waited, not for a reply, but for a shift she couldn't quite name. Life went on as if nothing had happened. He acted as if his cruel words were forgotten, as if the night had passed without weight. But then came the dinner, an ordinary family gathering that carried a strange undercurrent. His mother had hosted it like always, with warmth and careful attention to detail. The table was set, the food was served, and conversation moved easily between shallow pleasantries. She sat quietly, present but removed, unsure of what, if anything, would come of her letter. And then, just as dessert was being served, his mother spoke. Not to her son, but to the room. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, smoothed it open with calm fingers, and began to read. Her voice was steady, unhurried, echoing with the kind of quiet sorrow that silenced every other sound. The letter was read exactly as it had been written, without anger, without blame. Just truth. The air in the room changed. Laughter stopped. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes shifted. The words laid bare the reality no one else had seen. His cruelty. Her quiet endurance. The depth of what had been ignored and dismissed. He sat frozen, his expression drained of color, no smirk to hide behind now. Each word was a mirror, forcing him to see himself without the soft filter of denial. And when she finished, his mother folded the letter, set it beside her plate, and said nothing more. But the silence that followed was louder than any argument, sharper than any insult. He didn't speak. He didn't try to defend himself. The letter had said everything, and the room around him had absorbed every word. His father stared at him with quiet disbelief. His sister looked down at her plate as if ashamed to meet anyone's eyes, and even the youngest cousin, barely old enough to understand, seemed to sense something had shifted. No one moved to comfort him. No one tried to smooth it over. The easy charm he had always relied on had dissolved completely. For once, his voice held no power. The mask had slipped, and now they all saw what she had carried alone for so long. There was no shouting, no dramatic walkouts, just stillness, the kind that lingers after a truth has finally landed where it belongs. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply sat there, calm and composed, the same way she had been on the night he humiliated her. But this time, the shame wasn't hers to hold. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting, searching for someone to restore his image, to rescue him from the weight of exposure. But no one came. No one spoke in his defense. The silence made it clear. They had seen enough. She stood slowly, thanked his mother politely for dinner, and left without looking back. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. In the quiet aftermath, he was left surrounded by everything he had taken for granted, now turned cold. And for the first time, he seemed to realize what he had lost. Not just her, but the version of himself he could no longer pretend to be.